Imagine giving another human being permission to cut you up, cook you, and eat you, just to fulfill your fantasy of experiencing what it feels like to be eaten by a cannibal. I know that human beings have very many fantasies, and some are very dark ones. However, only a few people dare act to fulfill these fantasies because, well, most of them are downright disgusting. For the two men in this story, they decided to go ahead and fulfill their fantasies, and what would follow would be life-changing consequences. One would die, and the other would go to prison for life. Stay with me. This is one of the craziest true stories I came across on the internet. And by the time we get to the end, I'm sure you will agree with me that there was something very cuckoo, insane, about the two people who are part of our story today. So let's get into it. I want you to picture a quiet village in the middle of Germany. There are neat little houses lined up in the German perfection way, perfectly trimmed lawns and clean streets. We are talking about a typical boring village, the kind of place where nothing interesting ever happens, and the locals seem to love it that way, maybe except for one man. Now picture yourself inside one of those houses. It is a timber structure with a small but neat garden. Inside this house is where we meet a man sitting at his computer, busy typing an advertisement that no one had ever posted before, but one that would become infamous, and not in a good way. The year is 2001. The man's name is Armin Meiwes. Not sure I'm pronouncing that correctly. Anyway, at this time, he's 42 years old, a computer technician, and to everyone in his small hometown of Rotenburg, he is completely unremarkable and just your typical neighborhood working man. But Armin has carried a secret obsession since he was a boy. He grew up lonely, an only child in a house that felt empty. As a kid, he used to imagine having a brother, someone who could never leave him or abandon him. Somewhere along the way, that imagination started shaping itself into something darker, and this is where things started getting crazy. The idea was that the only way to truly keep someone forever with him was to take them into yourself completely. We shall understand what that truly meant in a minute. By this time, the internet had arrived, and being a computer technician, Armin already knew his way around the internet, and he found out that there were forums for almost anything. Now, the most fascinating find he made was to discover a small, hidden corner where people talked openly about cannibalism as a fantasy. Now let's take you back a bit to what he was doing when we introduced him sitting at the computer. Having found his little corner of the internet, something inside Armin told him that this is it. This is what he had been missing all along. Without wasting time, he typed and posted his advert on one of the forums, on a site nicknamed the Cannibal Cafe. And he was very straightforward. He wasn't about to be vague with what he wanted. Armin expressly stated that he wanted a young, well-built man, willing to be slaughtered and eaten by him. We are talking about someone willingly and freely, without being coerced or tortured, offering their own body to some stranger, so that the stranger can fulfill their fantasy of cutting and eating another human being. Now here's another crazy part. Nearly 200 people replied to this advert. Well, most people were just curious, some were joking, and others just wanted him to explain himself further. But one reply was different. Now, let's shift to the other crazy person in the story. His name was Bernd Brandes. He was a 43-year-old engineer from Berlin. By all means, Brandes seemed to be living a good life. He had a good job, and by most accounts, he lived a normal life. Now Brandes had a strange fantasy, and that's why he clicked so fast with Armin. While Armin's fantasy was to cut and eat a fellow human being, Brandes' fantasy was to be cut up and be eaten by another human being. It was a perfect match. When Armin's ad appeared, Brandes naturally answered it. What followed were weeks of messages back and forth between the two crazy men, working out in explicit and methodical detail, exactly how this would happen. This was something that was planned out carefully, and both men had plenty of time to come to their senses and abandon their foolish fantasies. But none did. And in March of 2001, Brandes packed a bag and got on a train to Rotenburg to go meet Armin. What happened next was recorded. Armin filmed parts of the encounter himself, partly out of fascination, and partly, it would later turn out, because he wanted proof that everything that happened next was agreed to. Brandes took sleeping pills and alcohol to dull the pain. Then, with his consent, Armin carried out a mutilation so specific it would dominate headlines 2 years later, before ultimately killing him. Afterward, Armin did something almost unbelievable in its calm, procedural horror. He butchered the body. He wrapped portions of it and stored them in his freezer, alongside his everyday groceries. Over the following weeks, he ate more than 20 kilograms of it, some pieces prepared with garlic and pepper, cooked like any other meal. For months, no one knew, and Armin thought he had gotten away with it. But, for some reason, his fantasy became an obsession. He needed another human being to eat, since, well, he was quickly running out of stock. And since his ad had worked so well the first time, he figured why not post another ad, and maybe another person willing to be eaten might contact him. So, he posted another ad, but this time, things were different. When Armin went looking for a second willing participant online, investigators caught wind of the story. Soon enough, police searched his home in December of 2002. What they found in that freezer confirmed everything. He was arrested, of course, and he was about to face a very public trial in Germany, but there was a big problem. Germany at the time had no specific law against cannibalism, so prosecutors had to fall back on the law they did have and declared that this was a homicide. But Armin's defense made an argument that had almost never been tested in a courtroom before. He argued it wasn't murder at all. It was mercy killing. His lawyer said Brandes himself had wanted this. Brandes had researched it, traveled all the way to Rotenburg for it, and consented to every single thing step on camera. If a person truly, freely wants to die, the defense argued, doesn't that change what the law should call the person who helps them? In January 2004, the court in Kassel didn't fully buy this theory Armin's lawyers wanted to push, but it didn't fully reject it either. Eventually, judges convicted Armin not of murder, but of manslaughter, and sentenced him to 8.5 years. The court effectively treated the case as something closer to an assisted killing than a predatory one. The whole of Germany was outraged. Remember that this had become a public trial and people were following closely. The prosecutors were outraged too. Under German law, unlike in many countries, prosecutors are allowed to appeal a sentence they believe is too lenient. And they did exactly that. A second trial was ordered. This time, the court reached a very different conclusion, that despite the consent, despite the video evidence, despite every careful plan the two men had made together, Armin had acted to satisfy his own long-held desire to kill. That made it murder. In 2006, Armin Meiwes was sentenced to life in prison. The case didn't end with the sentencing. It kicked off a debate that legal scholars are still having today. Can a person consent to their own death? And if they do, does that consent mean anything at all in the eyes of the law? Most legal systems answer no. A person's agreement to be killed doesn't erase the killing. It doesn't matter how clearly it was documented or how many months of planning went into it. In the years after this case, Germany went further and wrote a specific law against killing for the purpose of consuming human flesh, making sure the country would never again have to stretch an old manslaughter statute to fit a case like this. As for Armin Meiwes, he's still alive today in 2026, still in prison, and has spoken publicly since, describing himself as reformed man. What do you think of this story? Let us know in the comments section, and do not forget to hit that subscribe button.